I just wanted to seed that thought. We'll be supporting this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call Louisa Wall.
Tēnā koe te mangai o te whare. That was a really interesting way to end your speech, Mr. Reti. Can I just say that I am a member of the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Select Committee, and I just want to provide a bit more history, because I'm a bit of a history buff. I like to know where things began and how we've ended up where we are today. And I just want to quote that the Arms Trade Treaty was part of a global effort which began in 1997 by Costa Rican President and 1987 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Oscar Arias. And it was actually about the concept of human security. So there was a general recognition at the United Nations and in some countries that we needed to regulate an unregulated activity. So that was the reality of the beginnings of the Arms Trade Treaty that, as some of my colleagues have already noted, that we signed in 2013, we ratified in 2014, and we will accede to it through the progression of this piece of legislation through the House and join 94 other countries. And the question of why we would do that is incredibly important, and this is where I do want to pick up on what my colleague Dr. Shane Reti said, because this is all about stopping military weapons and arms getting to areas such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, the Ukraine, Yemen, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mexico and the Central African Republic. And I mention those territories in the world because that is where armed conflict is happening today. So the whole intention of this bill is actually really simple. It's to create a registration process and a regime that ensures when these types of weapons are being distributed, exported, imported around the world, that to do so in New Zealand you now have to register. So currently it's a voluntary registration. So through the implementation of this piece of legislation, you will have to register, and in that registration process you will be given a permit. If your activity, or if the activity you or your business wants to engage in, is consistent with New Zealand's obligations under this Arms Trade Treaty. And there could be conditions on those permits, so it's not an open slather. Once you get your permit, you can do whatever you like. And the reality of what we're trying to do is to ensure that the world is a secure place. So underlying this is security for us as a country. Obviously, it has to reinforce our defence commitments, but it's also critically about our international relations. And actually, everything we do on the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Select Committee critically looks at our international relations. So the whole intention of the bill is to build peace, it's to reduce human suffering, it's to promote cooperation and transparency, and also to hold countries accountable for their actions and the consequences of those actions on other countries. My colleague Willow Jean Prime highlighted some really good discussion and debate in the Select Committee, which actually did happen, and I do want to take the opportunity to comment about Duncan Webb, Gauras Garaman and Chris Penk. All lawyers had really interesting discussions about issues of jurisdiction. And as you'll see, and I note that in introducing the debate tonight, the Honourable Winston Peters actually highlighted the 7 changes that the Select Committee recommended. And they weren't random changes. Actually, on a lot of occasions, we had quite intense discussion about the jurisdictional scope and having to limit it and be really clear about who this piece of legislation applies to. So I too want to add my thanks to the officials who had to listen to those discussions and translate those discussions into this coherent piece of legislation that we have before us tonight. And I see my colleague Simon O'Connor, who is the chair of our Select Committee, nodding his head, because in some instances I was a passive observer as these 3 people had these dynamic conversations. And so it really was a lesson in a Select Committee wanting to work together for the best interests of our country, and also to produce a piece of legislation that actually we could hold up as world-leading, world-class. And so I'm quite proud of the amendments that we made, and obviously will be accepted by the House tonight if we all agree at the conclusion of my debate. I do want to highlight one of the issues that I think was really good about the submission of annual reports. So we are regulating the trade in weapons, and we're wanting transparency. And I think our request for those who are granted permits to then submit an annual report, again, speaks to our wanting to be as transparent as possible. So we want to know what weapons have been brokered. Where are we sending them to? You know, we need to hold ourselves accountable to the intention, as I said before, of the Arms Trade Treaty, and to ensure that things that happen in our country actually don't contribute to exacerbating those conflicts that I've mentioned earlier. Because fundamental to us doing this and ensuring transparency, actually at the end of the day, is to deter the people that do want to contribute to war, that are profiting from war, that are distributing these weapons in these areas that fundamentally lead to the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. And so from our perspective, I think what we've tried to do is actually embody the spirit of that Arms Trade Treaty throughout the whole of this piece of legislation. It was also really interesting. No one's really talked about why we've increased the period for which brokers are required to keep records from 5 to 7 years. And actually for us it was about aligning it to requirements concerning tax records and fire and emergency New Zealand contracts and levy payments. So within the piece of legislation, we also had some principles about it aligning to other pieces of legislation so that there was some symmetry and that there was a rationale and there was also, again, an ability to hold those companies accountable going forward. I really don't have much more to say other than I like how select committees work sometimes. You know, really constructive engagement. We do listen to one another. We have quite dynamic discussions and end up making changes to bills that make them better. And I'm presuming, even though the other side's been trying to beat up the fact that Ron Mark in a subsequent life did not support this bill at first reading when it was entered into the House by the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, who then was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that actually, as a parliament, we should celebrate the nights and the days when we have pieces of legislation that we all agree on and that there is consensus. Kia ora mai nō tātou.
Kia ora. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Brokering Weapons and Related Items Controls Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. Call on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Commerce Amendment Bill interrupted debate on